Ever heard the saying, history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes? Keep that in mind as we witness natural disasters disrupting the normal churn of a presidential campaign in its final weeks, and as we witness Donald Trump's response and reaction to hurricanes that are right now putting millions of American lives in danger as we come on the air. Faced with a crisis where, again, life and death decisions are being made, a crisis that requires more than just a partisan political response, one that requires real, trusted leadership. Donald Trump continues to act like someone who has stewed in his own lies and delusion for so long that he's incapable of telling the truth, even when lives are on the line. Just last night, he claimed that there was not a single emergency worker on the ground helping people impacted by Hurricane Helene.
How would you do it differently?
I'd have a tremendous team of people here. They don't have any people here. The people are all, I was in North Carolina yesterday. I was in Georgia. And Georgia's different. You have a good governor. He's doing a very good job. But North Carolina is a disaster. And it was also hit very hard. But they don't have the people. And they're complaining there's no people around to help.
So, not true. It's not a thing. But make no mistake, those lies that Trump is telling are hurting people, actual people. They're having an impact. Here's North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper responding on Morning Joe.
This swirling vortex of disinformation is beginning to affect people there on the ground. I had an officer come up to me and say, why are they saying we aren't doing anything? In fact, this is demoralizing to all of the people who are working so hard. Those first responders who went into people's homes and pulled them out of windows in swirling waters, people who are working around the clock to get oxygen bottles and insulin to people in the remote, rugged areas of the mountains. The people who are working to get the power back on. We've gone from 1 million to about 140,000 power outages. People who are working to restore communications and water systems. And you're also making some people wary of applying for aid and relief because you have these crazy stories about FEMA coming in and taking people's land and stopping donations from coming in.
Now, one North Carolina official told Politico today this, quote, the scale of the misinformation and simply the number of posts and the eyeballs that each of those posts are being given online, particularly on X, that's what's different and truly scary, according to this official. Quote, this has felt like you're in the Thunderdome and people are just piping the noise in. They create this great confusion. It creates chaos and a crisis moment where you need people to be able to work together and come together. Now, the country has actually been right here, right where we are today, before with Donald Trump. When the moment came for, when time came for a moment where, as this official told Politico, quote, you need people to be able to work together and come together. On that issue, Trump was tested, and we all watched, and we all saw him fail. When Trump was faced with a once-in-a-century pandemic, he ignored the experts and the scientists and the models and chose instead to spread lies and disinformation and delusions because he thought it would benefit him politically to do so. Remember this.
And then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning? I'm taking it, hydroxychloroquine. Right now, yeah. Frontline workers take it. A lot of doctors take it. I think wearing a face mask as I greet presidents, prime ministers, dictators, kings, queens, I don't know, somehow I don't see it for myself. It's a very contagious virus. It's incredible, but it's something that we have tremendous control over. What it is estimated might not come back at all, Jeff.
Now, Trump would have a hard time admitting it because he doesn't admit that he lost in 2020. But his response to the pandemic may very well have cost him his reelection. That's according to a political autopsy from his own pollster. And now, 4 years later, with 4 weeks to go before an election in this country, viewers of this program, and really anyone who's followed our nation's politics for the last few years, could be forgiven if it feels like a deja vu moment. Because the gap between what is needed in all of our leaders in a time of crisis, when life and death decisions are being made based on the information input, when all that's on the line, and what Donald Trump is offering and his indifference to the outcome looks a lot like it did in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic. In the wake of one hurricane devastating parts of the South and another potentially historic hurricane right now barreling toward Florida, officials and scientists and experts and leaders are begging people to trust the warnings and listen to them. Florida meteorologist John Morales was overcome with emotion, describing the danger posed by Hurricane Milton.
It's just an incredible, incredible, incredible hurricane. It has dropped 50 millibars in 10 hours. I apologize. This is just horrific. Even though it is expected to weaken on approach, it is so incredibly strong right now that you're going to find it very difficult for it to be nothing less than a major hurricane when it makes landfall in Florida.
Morales will join us on this program in a couple of minutes, but we're going to start with the Acting Director of Response and Recovery for FEMA, Keith Turry. Keith, tell us what you're focused on right now and what you want people to hear and heed.
Yeah, as you just heard, this is a very dangerous storm in terms of its strength and the size as it approaches landfall. The expectation is that the wind field is going to expand, and it's going to bring a range of hazards to the entire Florida peninsula, not only the storm surge, but heavy winds and rain and flooding. Some rivers are going to flood in places that they've never flooded before because the water is not going to be able to make it out to the ocean because of the storm surge. The most important thing we want everyone to know right now is they have to take preparation now, and specifically to those people that are in the mandatory evacuation areas where they're being told to evacuate, you must evacuate. Every time we go through this, there's always some people that aren't able to evacuate, and unfortunately we have a loss of life today, and now is the time to be able to take those actions and get out of those areas. We can rebuild, we can focus on recovery later, but this is the time in which actions are going to save lives.
Let me show you what the Tampa mayor, Jane Castor, had to say about the risk if people don't heed the warnings.
I can tell you right now that they may have done that in others. There's never been one like this. And this, Helene was a wake-up call. This is literally catastrophic. And I can say without any dramatization whatsoever, if you choose to stay in one of those evacuation areas, you're going to die.
How do you contend with what feels like a lack or less trust, maybe, that some portions of the population have in warnings like that? How does that impact rescue and recovery efforts?
Yeah, it's obviously a significant challenge. Trust is extremely important. We need people to listen to the message that they're getting from the Weather Service, from the Hurricane Center, from their local officials, as you just heard. And when we have situations where, information is being provided that isn't accurate, it undermines the entire system and the entire credibility of what those that are trying to save lives are saying. And I just want to footstop what the mayor said there. This is not the same as the storms that they've seen in the last couple of years. The track of this storm is a scenario that we've watched for some time and understand is going to create flooding in areas that have never flooded before. 10 to 15 feet of storm surge, that is not something that you can survive. And so I just really want people not to think about the last storm and think about the neighborhoods that may have been flooded and yours might be okay. If you're in an evacuation area, you need to evacuate.
And the governor of North Carolina and other officials have talked about what is always sort of advanced operational work under the most difficult circumstances for FEMA and the FEMA workforce. But just talk about what it's like when people don't necessarily welcome or trust the FEMA people and workforce who are there to help them.
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, the men and women FEMA are some of the most dedicated civil servants in all of government. They dedicate their lives to supporting people and helping keep them safe and helping them recover on some of their worst days. They travel away from their families. They sacrifice time on their own lives, and they do that because they know what the survivors are going through is much worse than that. And so they are committed and dedicated to supporting them. When you have misinformation out there that is creating misconceptions, or people are afraid that FEMA is going to take their funding, their land, or not going to give them enough resources, that can create anger and hostility, and it's just not productive to the goal that we all have, which is to save lives, help people recover, help make them comfortable, and try to get things back to normal as quickly as possible.